Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Callie Ann Poulton. Callie Ann Poulton was born on September 20th, 1989, in Rochester, New York. She was the only child in her family, and Callie's parents gave her all their attention and love. When Callie was 3 years old, her parents decided to divorce, and Callie lived with her mother. Her father maintained a good relationship with his ex-wife and visited Callie often. Callie's mother, Judy, moved to an apartment complex in the quiet area suburb of Rochester. Although Judy's ex-husband helped take care of Callie, she still had financial difficulties. When Callie was 4 years old, Judy found a part-time job to save money for a trip to Disney World with Callie the following summer. Judy's job was to deliver magazines to customers in her neighborhood. On the evening of May 23, 1994, Judy was getting ready for her job. Judy was sitting at home, putting flyers in the magazine before going out to socialize. At that time, Callie asked permission to go for a walk because she wanted to ride her tricycle on a beautiful evening. Judy looked outside and saw many other children playing in the yard, so Judy agreed to let her daughter go outside for a few minutes. However, when Judy finished getting ready and went outside to call Callie home, she could not find Callie there. Judy looked around but could not find Callie. She searched the yard and her body but could not find her daughter. She also could not hear Callie's tricycle, although it often made a clear noise. As time passed, Judy's worry increased, and she began asking neighbors if they had seen Callie. Some reported seeing Callie playing with her friends in the yard, but did not know where she went after that. When the neighbors learned that Callie was missing, they joined in the search but were unable to find Callie or her bicycle. Judy believed that her daughter could not have gone anywhere on her own because she had taught Callie to only ride her bike in their yard. Callie had never told her mother, and Callie's little bike could not take her far. Judy also thought that if Callie went out of the yard, she would be discovered immediately. Fearing the worst, Judy decided to contact the police for assistance. Within minutes, the police arrived at the scene and began an urgent search. Firefighters and canine units soon joined the search. The police conducted a house-to-house search and searched the surrounding area. They believed that Callie was still somewhere in the area. Since the kidnapping was a possibility, the police suspected that the kidnappers might be residents of the complex. The reason is that the area has quite strict security controls, so it is unlikely that a stranger would enter the area and snatch Callie out of the yard without anyone noticing. The complex has a total of 300 apartments, and the residents are willing to cooperate with the police, opening their doors for them to search. In case no one is home, the complex manager will provide a spare key for the lock so that the police can check. However, all these efforts do not bring the desired results. No apartment has ever found Callie or her bicycle. The search continued throughout the night, and around 4 a.m., the mission was reclassified as a kidnapping. A special police unit took over the project, and the undercovers asked Judy if there was anyone in their lives who might want to harm them. When the police asked about someone who might be involved in Callie's disappearance, Judy quickly met a man in the apartment complex that made her suspicious. The man, Mark, 22 years old, had just moved in with his wife and 1.5-year-old son. During the conversation with Mark, Judy felt that his actions were very strange. During a conversation, Mark said that Judy's daughter was very beautiful, but his tone of voice made Judy feel uncomfortable. What was more worrying was when Mark said that he had seen all the girls in the apartment complex and thought Callie was the prettiest. Mark once asked Judy a very surprising question. He wanted to know if Callie would talk to Judy if someone tried to touch Callie. Judy answered yes and immediately left the yard. Before that, Callie liked to play with Mark on the playground, but since that conversation, Judy has not let her daughter near him, even when she is present. During the conversation with the secrets, Judy recalled another detail. After she went out to look for Callie, she saw Mark walking out to the playground with his son. She asked him if he had seen Callie, and Mark said no. Judy also noticed something strange, that Mark's sneakers were missing their shoelaces, but she did not pay much attention to it at the time. The police decided to mark the matter and took him to the headquarters to determine some issues. Mark denied any involvement in Callie's disappearance and agreed to take a lie detector test. The test results showed that Mark answered truthfully, so he was released. In addition, Judy accidentally provided an alibi for Mark when she saw him playing with her son on the playground at the exact time she was looking for Callie. The police went to Mark's apartment early in the investigation but did not find Callie or Callie's bike. After eliminating Mark as a suspect, the undercover police continued their investigation. They began to investigate Judy to see if she was involved in Callie's disappearance. Judy understood that this was part of the investigation process and answered all of their questions honestly. Callie's disappearance attracted public attention when information about the incident was broadcast on local newspapers and posted on billboards all over the city. The alert received many calls with information, but after a thorough investigation, all of them turned up nothing. However, Judy did not give up and continued to search for Callie. Judy devoted all her time and energy to finding Callie. She contacted the media and did everything she could to find Callie. Some compassionate people have also come forward to help her, not only helping to distribute flyers but also raising a $100,000 reward for any useful information about Callie's disappearance. Judy was invited to appear on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Callie's disappearance was featured on a popular television show about unsolved cases. The police investigated the case for 2 years without success. Although they gathered some clues, nothing helped them find a solution. On August 9, 1996, when a woman called the police and told them about a serious argument between her and her husband. During the call, the woman said she was tired of her husband's strange behavior and wanted a divorce. The man tried to convince her not to do so, and told her about the difficulties he was facing. Suddenly, the man confessed a terrible secret: he had killed Callie. The woman was shocked and took her child to her father's house immediately. She then called 911 and revealed her husband's name as Mark Christie, who was also Judy's neighbor. The detectives were surprised to hear her story, but they soon encountered a serious problem. Under state law, any information shared between spouses is protected and cannot be used as evidence in court. This means that even if Mark tells the truth, the police cannot arrest or question him. Furthermore, the police recalled that Mark's apartment was searched in the early hours of the investigation, and he was in the yard with his child shortly after Callie went missing. This led the police to suspect that Mark did not have enough time to kidnap and kill Callie. After listening to Mark's wife's story, Detective Crow decided to find out more information. Through the investigation, Crow discovered that Mark and his family had moved out of the apartment complex just weeks after Callie went missing. Because the parents of the 2 girls accused Mark of standing naked in front of their house in full view. However, no formal investigation was conducted into this, because by law, Mark was standing in his own home. However, Mark's actions have raised considerable suspicion in the detective's mind. When Detective Crow visits Mark in another city 50 miles from Rochester, he is stopped by Mark's mother. She refuses to allow the detective to see Mark and demands the presence of a lawyer. Mark's mother states that her son will not answer any questions without his lawyer present. Mark seems to know about his wife's report to the police, and Detective Crow realizes that there is little he can do in this situation. Mark's confession to his wife cannot be used as evidence in court. However, Detective Crow is not giving up yet. While talking to Mark's mother, he convinces Mark to agree to answer some questions about Callie's case. Crow suggests that they go to a nearby restaurant and chat over coffee. Mark agrees, but only if Crow takes him to see his lawyer afterward. They stop at a nearby Italian restaurant. During this time, Detective Crow chatted with Mark in a friendly manner, trying not to pressure him. The tactic worked, and Mark began to speak. He expressed remorse for what he had done to Callie, saying that his actions had haunted him for the past 2 years. According to Crow, Mark kept seeing Callie's picture in newspapers and flyers, and her face seemed to follow him everywhere. To avoid scaring Mark, Crow approached the conversation cautiously. Although he had known Mark since the early days of the investigation, this was not their first conversation. Crow told Mark that he had fooled the entire police team. Mark responded that he did not want to boast, but the way he had disposed of the bike was very clever. Mark asked Crow if he wanted to know the details, but he warned that he would only talk about the bike and not reveal any more information. Crow tried to keep his tone light and friendly to avoid scaring Mark and gather as much information as possible. Mark wanted Crow to know that Callie's tricycle had been stored in his apartment for 3 days since Callie had gone missing. Mark knew that the police would search all apartments without a warrant because it was protocol when a child was in danger. Mark quickly decided to disassemble the bike into small parts and hide them in hard-to-find places in the apartment. Mark carefully hid some of the parts in his clothes and put them in the closet, while the other parts were put in small bags and hidden in his car. Mark then slowly disposed of these bags, storing them in places far from the apartment. During this time, the police were stationed at the exit of the apartment complex, checking each bike. Since they were only looking for Callie, these small bags did not attract their attention. Detective Crow sees an opportunity to get a full confession from Mark. So he begins to tell Mark that Callie's death may not have been his fault, but a tragic accident. Mark asks what sentence he could face, and Crow suggests that it could be around 25 years. Mark argues that it would be unfair for him to spend half his life behind bars, away from his wife and son. He also says that he has been living with his own personal grief for the past 2 years, and that should be taken into account when making a decision. Although these words may seem like an excuse, Crow continues his tactics. He advises Mark to ease his grief and tell what really happened. Mark says that he is willing to confess everything, but only after talking to a lawyer. Crow understands that the lawyer will not allow Mark to confess to the crime without evidence against him. So Crow told Mark that if he did not tell the truth, Callie's parents would never know what happened to Callie, or whether Callie suffered before she died. Mark replied, "Callie did not suffer." Crow felt that Mark was ready to confess, so he advised Mark to do the right thing for himself, his family, and God. Upon hearing this, Mark looked at Crow and finally admitted his crime. He reiterated that Callie did not suffer and confessed that he had strangled Callie. Mark added to his story that he had not done anything bad to Callie. However, Mark said that that evening, Callie came to his apartment and wanted to play with her 1.5-year-old son. Since he knew that Callie's mother would not agree to her coming to his house, Mark decided to keep quiet about it. When Callie entered the apartment, Callie went upstairs and went into the room to play with Mark's child. After about 10 minutes, Mark heard Callie's mother calling her name in the yard and became worried. Mark feared that Callie's mother would be angry that he had allowed her into the house without permission. Mark decided to go up to and strangle Callie with his bare hands. Detective Crow questioned the accuracy of this story. It seemed that Mark had intended to lure Callie into his apartment by taking advantage of his wife's absence, and the excuse of playing with his son may have been just an excuse. There, Mark may have approached Callie, and when he heard Judy calling Callie's name, he feared that Callie would reveal what had just happened. In addition, Crow also recalled the detail that Judy had seen him wearing sneakers without laces, which he could have used as a deadly instrument. This means that the crime was not spontaneous, but planned by Mark. Mark tried to minimize the severity of his crime by changing some details in the story. But Detective Crow understood that if he spoke out his suspicions, Mark might change his mind and refuse to talk about what he did to Callie. So Detective Crow continued to act and listen to the story. Mark claimed that after the murder, he carried Callie's body into the kitchen and left her on the floor. He then took his son outside to create an alibi for himself in order to divert the police's suspicions. Mark knew that Judy was calling his daughter's name in the yard. In order not to arouse suspicion, Mark wanted Judy to see him. Mark then returned home and placed the laundry basket on top of Callie's body, covering it with clothes. After a few minutes, he put the basket in the trunk of his car and took his son to work. At that time, many people were searching for Callie and no one paid attention to Mark. When he arrived at the company, Mark parked his car and left the laundry basket at the back door of the building. Then he drove forward, then Mark turned back and lied to his co-workers that he had forgotten something at work to cover up his actions. Then Mark climbed onto a tank of liquid coolant and dropped Callie in, before tying a heavy metal object to Callie. Then Mark threw away Callie's clothes, but did not remove Callie earrings. Finally, Mark returned home and joined the search for Callie with other neighbors. Mark took Callie's body out of his workplace before the police arrived to investigate. When confessing his crime, Mark said that killing Callie was a big mistake. After providing the necessary information to Detective Crow, Mark paid for the meal and left a $2 tip. He then accompanied the detective to the police station and was arrested for murder. Mark's attorney attempted to withdraw his confession, but was unsuccessful. Since Mark had volunteered the information, Detective Crow had not broken any laws. Mark's confession was still admissible. The police went to Mark's workplace and opened the box containing Callie's body. 2 years after Mark killed Callie, Callie's body was still in the box. Due to the high level of decomposition, experts were unable to determine the cause of death or any other details. They were only able to confirm the victim's identity, and Callie's family was finally able to bury Callie. Mark pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. Mark's lawyer had previously negotiated a deal that would see the kidnapping charges dropped and Mark would face only the murder charge. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gretchen Harrington. Gretchen Harrington was born on June 13, 1967, in Pennsylvania. She was the youngest of 3 sisters, and her family moved to the small town of Brawl shortly after her birth. Gretchen's father, a pastor, took a job at the local church, and Gretchen quickly grew to love the town. She spent much of her free time outdoors with her sisters and friends. Brawl was a safe community where parents felt comfortable letting their children play outside until dark. As a member of a devoutly religious family, Gretchen spent much time at her father's church and excelled in Sunday school, always getting top grades. On August 15, 1975, Gretchen's family was eagerly awaiting the return of her mother and newborn sister from the hospital. Gretchen wanted to be home to greet them, but her father encouraged her to attend Sunday school to keep up her grades. Gretchen reluctantly agreed to go to church and set off with her Bible. Her older sisters, who usually walked with her, stayed home that morning. However, Gretchen wasn't worried about the short 8-minute walk to church. Sunday school is divided into 2 sessions. The first session takes place at Trinity Church and lasts an hour and a half. After that, some of the children go to Father Gretchen's church. But when the children arrived at the second church at 11:30 a.m., Gretchen's father noticed that his daughter was not there. He assumed she might be at the first church, so he called to check. The pastor's wife answered, informing him that Gretchen was not there. She then told her husband, David, who was a Sunday school teacher. He was surprised by the news, since Gretchen had not attended his class that morning. Gretchen's father became worried when he couldn't find her. He asked David to contact the police and started searching the area between the churches and nearby streets, but she was nowhere to be found. He also reached out to the parents of her friends, but they were either at church or home. Her best friend, who was also David's daughter, hadn't seen her all day. As news of Gretchen's disappearance spread, the police quickly launched a search operation. Hundreds of volunteers joined in, many of whom knew Gretchen's father from his church. Together, they searched the entire town, then moved on to wooded areas and the riverbank. A police helicopter was also deployed to scan the area from above. The search continued through the night, but to no avail. The next day, more volunteers joined in. Police posted flyers with Gretchen's photo and information about her disappearance along the roads. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find Gretchen. After several days of searching, no significant clues were found and Gretchen's fate remains a mystery. The town is known for its safe environment, where children are often allowed to play outside freely without adult supervision from a young age. However, this sense of security is no longer there when Gretchen goes missing. Some people thought she might have run away from home, while others believed she had gone swimming in the river and drowned. However, the most alarming theory was that she had been abducted by someone. As a result, parents became extremely cautious and stopped letting their children go out alone. Police interviewed bystanders. They gathered some clues. One witness reported seeing a girl who looked like Gretchen near the church on the morning she went missing. According to the witness, a green sedan approached the girl, but the witness did not see what happened next. Another person shared a similar story, but this time described a white Cadillac approaching the girl. Police checked the owners of cars matching the description in the area. 4 days later, detectives received a new lead. A resident of Westchester, a town 30 minutes from Brawl, contacted police and reported finding children's shorts matching the description of Gretchen's clothing. Police immediately showed Gretchen's mother the shorts, but she confirmed that they did not belong to her daughter. The investigation into Gretchen's disappearance had stalled, with no progress made for several weeks. As a result, the police halted their search operation and shifted their focus to gathering more information. They continued to interview witnesses, but with each passing day, their hopes of finding Gretchen alive began to dwindle. Until October 14th, when police received a phone call. A jogger was running in a large national park, about 20 minutes from Brawl, when he stumbled upon a body. The jogger immediately alerted park rangers, who then notified the police. Upon arriving at the scene, police quickly determined that the body was that of a child. However, due to the severe state of decomposition, identification of the child was extremely difficult. Police suspected that Gretchen might be the victim, so they showed her parents the clothes found on her body. Gretchen's mother quickly identified them as her daughters because she had sewn them herself. Forensic experts later confirmed that the body was Gretchen's by comparing them to her dental records. They also determined that she had died from severe head trauma. Because the body was so badly decomposed, police were unable to gather further information, including whether Gretchen had been sexually assaulted. Additionally, DNA analysis was not available in 1975, leaving police without any further leads. News of the murder sparked renewed interest in the case, and police received numerous tips from the community. The investigation into Gretchen's death turned up no leads. Police screened nearby residents with a history of violent crime, but nothing came up. Months later, the case had made no progress. Over the years, the case was reopened periodically, and the police reviewed the available information. However, each time, the investigation yielded no new evidence. Even applying DNA analysis was of no help in this case, as no foreign DNA was found on Gretchen's body or clothing. The case of Gretchen's murder went unsolved for decades, occasionally resurfacing in newspapers and on television. However, it wasn't until recent years that the case regained widespread public attention. Two local journalists, Joanna and Mike, decided to write a book about the crime, dedicating several years to gathering information. As children, both Joanna and Mike grew up in the same town as Gretchen. Joanna, who was only 9 years old when the crime occurred, the town had changed forever, and children were no longer allowed to roam freely. Leave home unsupervised. This fear lasted for years, leaving a lasting impression on the townspeople, the memory of Gretchen's murder still fresh in their minds. To write their book, Joanna and Mike had access to the case files and interviewed individuals involved in the investigation. By carefully piecing together the events surrounding Gretchen's disappearance, they were able to reconstruct the entire story. The book, released in 2022, brought attention to Gretchen's case. Months later, a woman contacted police about Gretchen. The woman said she was 10 years old at the time of the murder and lived in Havertone, near Gretchen's home. She was friends with Gretchen and her sisters, as well as many other kids in the area. She often slept over at friends' houses, and one night, while she was at her sister's house, she woke up in the middle of the night feeling someone touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw their father standing in front of her, who quickly left. The next day, she stayed another night. Her friend's dad continued to come into her bedroom and started touching her. The next morning, she finally told one of her sisters about what happened to her. She was surprised that it happened quite often with her friends. When the woman returned home, she shared her entire story with her parents. However, instead of going to the authorities, they banned her from ever going to her friend's house again. This was just a week before Gretchen went missing. The woman eventually revealed the identity of the man involved in her story, David Zandstra, the same pastor who taught at Sunday school. She also shared that a month after Gretchen went missing, one of her friends told her about the incident, that a man had tried to kidnap her. The girl refused to get into his car and later confided to her friends that the real culprit was David Zandstra. The woman provided her personal diary as evidence of the information provided. In her diary entry on September 15, 1975, she documented her friend's request to keep the encounter secret due to fears of potential harm from David Zandstra. Upon receiving this new information, the police immediately reopened the investigation into Gretchen's disappearance. While reviewing the case files, detectives discovered several suspicious factors that indirectly implicated David Zandstra. It was David Zandstra who reported Gretchen missing to the police, providing investigators with a detailed description of her clothing: dark blue zip-up shorts with front buttons and pockets without zippers or buttons, and a white shirt with braided hair. However, he mentioned that he had not seen Gretchen that day, raising questions about how he knew what she was wearing. His description was later confirmed by the discovery of her body, dressed exactly as he had described. Police closely examined David, the man who taught Sunday school at Gretchen's father's church. David initially claimed he had not seen Gretchen on the morning of her disappearance. However, David's alibi gave him enough time to kidnap Gretchen, kill her, dump her body in the park, and return to the church to teach. The investigation revealed that David and his family had moved to another state just months after Gretchen went missing. This sudden move, combined with David's ownership of a green scooter, attracted the attention of the police. The police decided to question David, who was now 83 years old and living in Georgia. On July 17, 2023, they began questioning David. As the conversation progressed, David realized that the police suspected him of murder. In response, he denied all accusations and asked what evidence they had against him. David was confronted with incriminating evidence, including a woman's testimony about his inappropriate behavior at a sleepover and allegations of molesting his own daughter. When he learned that his secret had been exposed, David's demeanor changed. After 48 years of silence, he finally began to talk about the murder. According to David, on the morning of the murder, He drove his green American motor station wagon to the church where Gretchen's father was the pastor. He saw Gretchen leave the house and waited until no one was around before approaching her. He offered her a ride, and she agreed. However, instead of taking Gretchen to the church, David drove her to a secluded park area. He stopped the car and instructed her to undress, but Gretchen refused and asked to go home. In response, David struck her several times on the head, causing her to lose consciousness. He then removed her clothes and committed the crime before driving her to another park. He carried her body into the bushes and concealed it with branches. David then returned to the church to begin his classes. When David confessed to the crime, the police arrested him for Gretchen's murder. David went to Pennsylvania, where he was held pending trial. David's work held a respectable position in society, which protected him from suspicion. However, after the truth finally came to light, the police obtained a DNA sample and began comparing it with DNA from other unsolved cases. They also investigated the disappearances of young girls in the cities where he worked. Police have linked David to the disappearance of 4-year-old Amanda Campbell from California, who went missing in 1991. The case resembles Gretchen's. At the time, David Zandstra was a pastor in that same neighborhood. The police currently have no concrete evidence against David, but they have found similarities between the various cases and Gretchen's kidnapping. Therefore, they are investigating David as the possible perpetrator of the cases. The trial for Gretchen's murder has not yet begun. David's attorney is trying to delay the process and advise him to withdraw his confession. If this happens, the trial could drag on for years, and given his advanced age, David may not live to see the verdict. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Londano. Jennifer Londano, a 31-year-old engaged and responsible individual, failed to arrive at her job in Englewood, New Jersey, prompting concerns from her family and friends. As the manager of the newly opened Luna Lounge on Armory Street, Jennifer was a diligent worker with a spotless attendance record. However, on June 25, 2017, she vanished without a trace after closing the bar in the early morning hours. When she didn't show up for her shift that evening, her co-workers grew worried and attempted to contact her. But her phone was switched off, which was unusual because she always maintained regular communication with them. This lack of response heightening their anxiety, her loved ones decided to file a missing person report with the police, highlighting that she always checked in with them before going anywhere. As the investigation began, police visited Jennifer's apartment, where she lived alone. The officers found the front door locked with no signs of forced entry or damage. Upon entering the apartment, they initially noticed nothing out of the ordinary. The space was clean and well-maintained, with no signs of disarray or theft. At first glance, nothing suggested that the apartment was a crime scene. After investigating Jennifer's apartment and finding no leads, the police visited the bar where she worked as a manager to gather more information. They spoke with the staff at the establishment and discovered that Jennifer was well-liked by everyone, with no reported conflicts with patrons or employees. Her co-workers described her as kind, helpful, and highly respected. Jennifer was a driven and ambitious person who had a strong work ethic. In 2016, she partnered with 40-year-old Rafael Lolos to open the Luna Lounge in Englewood, New Jersey. The bar was successful, thanks in part to Jennifer's exceptional people skills and management abilities. Lolos provided the financial backing, while Jennifer was the face of the business, charming customers with her warm personality. What the police discovered during their conversation with the bar staff was that Jennifer and Rafael's relationship went beyond business. They were romantically involved, and their relationship was public knowledge. Despite their close relationship, they had not yet taken the step of living together. The investigation revealed that on the morning Jennifer was last seen, she had closed the bar and gotten into Raphael's car, which was waiting for her after work. As the last person to see her, Raphael became a key person of interest, and the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning. Raphael claimed that he drove Jennifer home from work after she closed the bar, and they spent some time together at her apartment before he left to let her rest for his shift that evening. Following her disappearance, Raphael maintained contact with Jennifer's family and collaborated with them to try to determine her whereabouts. Since there was no apparent connection between Raphael and Jennifer's disappearance, the police concentrated on investigating other leads. However, they faced challenges due to Jennifer's phone being turned off on the day she disappeared, with the last signal coming from a cell tower near her home. Neighborhood interviews yielded no suspicious information. As part of the investigation, the police requested banking records, as they often provide crucial clues in such cases. When the bank shared the data, it revealed an unexpected development: Jennifer's bank card had been used even after she went missing. The investigation led detectives to suspect that Jennifer was intentionally hiding, but her family strongly disagreed, convinced that she would never willingly cause them distress. To gather more information, the police began to investigate the activity on her card, seeking to determine when, where, and how it was used. 2 days after Jennifer's disappearance, on June 27th, a pedestrian walking along Pier 44 in Brooklyn noticed something unusual in the water. The person stared at the object for a while, unable to identify it, before realizing with shock that it was a human body, or at least part of one. The police were summoned to the scene, and the pier was sealed off. A thorough search by divers yielded no additional body parts or evidence. The police faced a daunting challenge in identifying the victim, but a potential lead emerged. A tattoo was discovered on the victim's right thigh during a forensic examination. The tattoo, which may have belonged to the victim, was partially translated from Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language with complex grammar. The police released an image of the tattoo, hoping someone would recognize it and provide information. Investigations revealed that the tattoo's inscription was Sanskrit, but incorrectly written. The tattoo artist and the victim seemed to intend to write Liliana, but did so with grammatical errors, suggesting neither of them was familiar with the language. For days after the initial gruesome discovery, police received another disturbing call from a passerby who spotted a leg on the riverbank near 79th Street. Police immediately cordoned off the area and pulled the leg out of the water. The leg, which was intact from the knee down, seemed to match the remains found earlier, leading investigators to believe they belonged to the same person. A notable detail was the pink-painted fingernails on the leg. Despite an extensive search by divers in the area, no other remains or evidence were found. However, forensic analysis soon confirmed that the fragments found were indeed from the same body. Around this time, the police had already identified the victim. A few days after releasing an image of the distinctive tattoo, a woman contacted the police station and revealed that she knew the tattoo's owner. It was Jennifer's mother, Gladys Quintero, who recognized the tattoo on the news and recognized it as belonging to her daughter. The tattoo, it turned out, was a tribute to Jennifer's late aunt and symbolized the name Lily or Liliana. Jennifer's mother to New York to identify human remains. When it was confirmed that the remains were Jennifer's, the family was left shattered. The discovery marked a significant turn in the case, transforming a missing person investigation into a homicide probe. The family was not only grief-stricken by Jennifer's death, but also horrified by the brutal circumstances surrounding it. Unfortunately, due to the state of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Despite an extensive search, the police were unable to recover additional body parts. As family and friends paid their respects to Jennifer at her workplace, the bar, detectives were making progress in their investigation. They tracked down leads on Jennifer's credit card usage. Through a thorough review of security footage and store visits, detectives identified the person who had used Jennifer's credit card, Raphael, Jennifer's boyfriend. They discovered that Raphael had left Jennifer's apartment on the day she disappeared to go shopping. His purchases, made with Jennifer's credit card, included a box of garbage bags and 2 meat cleavers from different stores. Later that evening, he crossed the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan, and his cell phone records placed him near the Hudson River. Raphael went home after leaving Jennifer's apartment and never returned. 2 days later, Jennifer's torso was discovered. The police suspected that Raphael might have killed her and dismembered her body using meat cleavers, a disturbing thought considering their romantic relationship. However, the evidence pointing to Raphael's guilt was mounting. As a result, the police obtained an arrest warrant and a search warrant for his home, anticipating that they would soon apprehend him. Raphael attempted to evade capture by renting a hotel room and paying in cash, but he was quickly tracked down and arrested. He did not resist arrest and denied any involvement in Jennifer's death, claiming that Jennifer had given him her credit card. Raphael continued to insist that Jennifer was fine when he left her, but detectives uncovered more evidence that contradicted his testimony. A search of his home revealed dark red stains in the bathroom, which were later confirmed by a lab test to be Jennifer's dried blood. Detectives investigating Jennifer's disappearance analyzed her communications with Raphael and found a pattern of frequent arguments, typically sparked by jealousy. A search of Raphael's home uncovered a box sent via post office and a bag that had previously contained a GPS tracking device. It became clear that Raphael had secretly installed the device on Jennifer's car, allowing him to monitor her movements. Cell phone data revealed that Raphael had picked Jennifer up from work and taken her to her apartment. Although Jennifer's phone was soon turned off, Raphael's phone remained active. Between 9 p.m. and midnight on the day of her disappearance, his phone sent a signal to a cell tower near the Hudson River. This suggests that Jennifer may have already been dead by then, and Raphael may have driven to the river to dispose of her body. Raphael and Jennifer's relationship was complex and tumultuous, with conflicts often centered on financial issues. Despite their efforts to establish a business together, opening a bar less than a year before her disappearance, their relationship was marked by animosity and blurred boundaries. Raphael's messages to Jennifer were volatile, veering between insults, threats, apologies, and declarations of love, with one notable instance where he referred to her as a gold digger. Jennifer's family was shocked and disbelieving when the man who had claimed to love her and helped search for her became the prime suspect in her murder. Raphael refused to explain himself, denied any wrongdoing, and hired a lawyer. Although police couldn't find the exact knives they knew Raphael had bought, they were able to purchase identical ones from the same store. Forensic analysis later confirmed that these knives were used to harm Jennifer's body. Raphael was subsequently charged with several crimes, including murder, desecration of remains, stalking, hindering apprehension, and credit card fraud. The trial, which began in November 2019, lasted for 2 months. Prosecutors claimed that Jennifer was killed by Raphael in her apartment during a jealous argument. Raphael's lawyers argued that the state had no concrete evidence to prove their claim, pointing out that there were no signs of a struggle in the apartment and no marks in the bathtub where Jennifer was allegedly dismembered. The prosecution countered that the lack of evidence was, in itself, evidence of a cover-up. The absence of any signs of a crime suggested that Raphael had made a deliberate effort to conceal his tracks. The bathtub, in particular, was found to be remarkably clean, with no DNA or physical evidence linking Jennifer to the scene. The prosecutor pointed out that an ordinary person's bathtub would not be as clean as the one in question. During the trial, Jennifer's mother emotionally addressed the judge, stating that the defendant had destroyed her life and her family. She emphasized that Jennifer was her beloved daughter, and the defendant's actions had left her devastated. After reviewing the case, the judge determined that Raphael was consumed by an obsession with Jennifer. When given the opportunity to speak, Raphael refused, only communicating with his lawyer. In December 2019, the jury deliberated for 3 days before finding Raphael guilty on all charges. The verdict was officially announced in February 2020. As a result, 43-year-old Raphael received the maximum sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 63 years. This means he will be 106 years old before he can be considered for parole. Unfortunately, the remainder of Jennifer's body was never found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the Runaway Bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a Runaway Bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kani Alm. Kani Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of 2 daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Kani moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Kani met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. citizen and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, Kani and Brandon were just friends, but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Kani's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Kani's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Kani's father, Ong Bai-yong, was diagnosed with cancer. Kani decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Kani and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Kani to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Kani and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their 2 pets. Kani's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Kani planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Kani organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Canny and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Canny parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot, rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Canny was excited to reunite with her childhood friends, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Canny soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Canny asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, but was okay with leaving early and promised her friends she would be back soon. Canny, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Canny realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Pearlie waited for 10 more minutes, but Canny still hadn't returned. Then, her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Pearlie immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Canny's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, they realized that Canny must have disappeared along with it. Pearlie was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Canny would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Canny's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Canny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving, with Canny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately filed a disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Canny's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur, desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Canny's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Canny's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Pearlie could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Canny's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was kidnapped failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Canny's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Canny's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel, and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Canny's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete, which had been used as stands for road signs, lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body, trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Kanny's mother, Pearlie, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Kanny's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare. The body was indeed that of their daughter, Kanny. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Kanny's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Pearlie held on to the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Kanny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots, and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Kanny's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures, seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Kanny Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Kanny Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Kanny's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kanny's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house, and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Kanny Ong. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of 2, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Kanny Ong that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him 2 IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Kanny Ong's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Kanny Ong's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Kanny Ong. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Kanny Ong. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, he observed Kanny Ong searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Kanny Ong became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area, where he began to harass Kanny Ong. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Kanny Ong. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Kanny Ong. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. Nearby, a car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Kanny Ong signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Kanny Ong, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Kanny Ong into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Kanny Ong pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Kenny Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Kenny Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Kenny Ong's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse, and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Kenny Ong was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Kenny Ong, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Kenny Ong was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Kenny Ong had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Kenny Ong's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Kenny's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Kenny Ong had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plane windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stab wounds on Kenny's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Kenny didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Kenny Ong. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Kenny Ong's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries, such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Kenny Ong's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Kat West. Kat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Kat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Kat West so attached to her dolls, she treats them like living creatures, sings to them and cherishes them. Kat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Kat West had to continue taking medication. Kat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Kat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Kat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Kat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Kat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Kat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Kat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Kat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Kat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Kat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Kat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Kat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Kat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Kat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling, and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Kat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Cat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Kat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Kat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Kat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Kat West's body was cold and stiff. Kat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Kat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m. and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Kat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Kat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Kat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Kat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Kat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Kat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Kat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door. Believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed, he claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Kat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested 2 possible scenarios: 1, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or 2, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Kat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Kat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Kat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams's phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Kat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Cat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Cat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12 revealed a heated dispute. Cat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife. After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Cat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams's defense team claimed that Cat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Cat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Jessica Patel. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England, where she grew up in a traditional Hindu community. As the eldest child, she developed a diligent and obedient nature from a young age. Jessica excelled academically, helped with household chores, and maintained a bright and cheerful personality. Jessica had a large social circle, but she was particularly close to a boy 3 years her senior, who was more reserved and shy. They often spent time together, and as Jessica matured, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Like many of her peers, she longed to find true love and build a happy family, much like the characters in her favorite movies. However, her romantic aspirations did not detract from her intelligence and determination. To achieve her goals, Jessica pursued higher education. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester, and 4 years later, she began studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There, she reconnected with Mitesh, an acquaintance who coincidentally attended the same faculty. They initially had no romantic feelings for each other, but over time, it turned into true love. This relationship has helped Mitesh grow and become more confident in himself. He is also accumulating knowledge and becoming more mature. Mitesh was extremely kind and caring towards Jessica, showering her with compliments and gifts. However, their happiness was short-lived. Jessica's mother passed away due to an incurable illness, leaving her devastated. Mitesh stood by Jessica's side, providing emotional support and comfort during this difficult time. As a result, their bond grew stronger. Jessica confided in her sister that she had finally found a trustworthy partner. Mitesh seemed perfect in every way, and she envisioned a happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh asked Jessica's father for permission to marry her, following traditional Hindu customs. Although her father had reservations about Mitesh and felt that they were too young to get married, Jessica convinced him otherwise. They eventually got married in July 2009. The wedding was held in the beautiful garden of the bride's home. Initially, the newlyweds, Mitesh and Jessica, seemed like a perfect couple. However, things took a turn for the worse soon after. Mitesh's behavior changed dramatically. He became distant and cold, leaving Jessica feeling lonely. Their intimate life also suffered, and they didn't have any physical relationship for about 10 months after their wedding. This was very distressing for Jessica, who couldn't understand why Mitesh's feelings towards her had changed so drastically. Jessica tried to find fault in herself, wondering if she was the reason for Mitesh's change in. Meanwhile, she had just graduated from university in 2010 and was looking forward to starting her career as a pharmacist. She has a good education and a promising career. However, Mitesh's attitude continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly controlling and suspicious, constantly monitoring Jessica's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather falls ill, his health begins to decline rapidly, and death seems inevitable. Manal's husband does not allow Jessica to spend much time with her family. This was the root of the conflict between they. When Manal confronted her husband about this, he became angry and responded by punching her in the face. As a result, when her grandfather was seriously ill, Jessica was only able to visit him a few times. Jessica comes from a traditional Indian family where his word is the law, restricting her from making her own choices. She felt trapped in a lonely marriage. One day, she confided in her family about her concerns. She expressed her suspicion that her husband, Mitesh, was being unfaithful. She noticed that whenever he received a phone call, he would excuse himself to another room. Additionally, he often stayed up late, spending hours alone, which further fueled her doubts. In 2012, Jessica's suspicions about her husband's infidelity were confirmed when she discovered romantic messages on his phone. Seeking help, she confided in Mitesh's cousin, with whom she had a good relationship. Instead of offering help or advice, the cousin blamed Jessica for her husband's behavior, implying that she was responsible for his infidelity. This response from Mitesh's cousin left Jessica feeling isolated and unsupported. To make matters worse, Mitesh also prohibited her from seeking comfort from her own sisters. It became clear that Mitesh was hiding something and trying to maintain his reputation and authority within the family and local community. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica relocated to Lynor, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, in an effort to start anew and distance themselves from their family. They purchased a large house, made renovations, and later opened their own pharmacy. Jessica had hoped that this fresh start would bring positive changes to their relationship. While their relationship did improve slightly, one thing was still missing: children. For 6 years, Jessica struggled with infertility, and Mitesh made veiled threats that he would leave her if she didn't become pregnant. In October 2015, she decided to go through in vitro fertilization. However, the initial attempts were unsuccessful, causing her to become increasingly anxious and depressed, especially with the added stress of hormone treatments. To make matters worse, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold towards her at home. He would only show affection in public, and even then, it seemed superficial. He was often preoccupied with his phone, and the tension between them became unbearable. She reached her breaking point and suggested they separate, confessing that she was unhappy in the marriage. Mitesh's response caught her off guard. He claimed to love her and promised that things would improve over time. He even suggested that having a baby would strengthen their family bond. Jessica believed his words. For a moment she felt comforted and listened to, and her doubts subsided. On May 9, 2018, Mitesh and Jessica Patel received the exciting news that 3 of their embryos had been successfully fertilized, with a transfer scheduled for the following month. Jessica was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a mother and eagerly shared the news with her family. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, on the evening of May 14, 2018, Mitesh Patel made a frantic call to the emergency services, reporting that he had found his wife's body at their home. He claimed that he had left the house earlier to buy food and pick up his laptop from work. When he returned home, he found that the house had been burglarized and Jessica was lying unconscious on the living room floor. Mitesh told police that Jessica's skin was cold to the touch and there were bruises on her neck. He was clearly distressed, crying as he spoke. The police assured him that rescuers were on the way. When the officers arrived, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape. A grocery bag was nearby. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jessica died on the scene. The investigators sought to determine the motive behind the heinous crime. Upon examination, they found that the house had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers and closets turned upside down. It was evident that the perpetrators had been searching for valuables, as they had even torn apart their bed mattress. The missing jewelry and cash further supported the notion that the primary motive was robbery. Jessica's husband, Mitesh, also believed that their house had been targeted by robbers. According to Mitesh's statement, on the day of the incident, he followed his usual routine, working a morning shift, going to the gym, and returning home afterward. His wife came home around 7 p.m. Later, Mitesh decided to order pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby pizzeria corroborated his alibi. Before leaving the pizzeria, he tried to call his wife to tell her he was on his way home, but no one picked up. Mitesh stopped at a pharmacy without notice, so he returned home later than expected. When Mitesh returned home at 8:50 p.m., he was met with a gruesome scene. His wife was bound, and their belongings were scattered everywhere. Neighbors was left reeling after the tragic event. This neighborhood is known as a wealthy and peaceful place, and has never had a crime before. The autopsy report revealed that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation, with the attacker using a bag, bare hands, and an electrical cord to ensure her demise. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators initially suspected that Jessica knew her attacker and had let them into the house. Jessica's family quickly arrived and comforted Mitesh, who appeared to be extremely sad and lost over the passing of his wife. However, the police had their suspicions, and a thorough search of the house uncovered some crucial clues that would eventually lead to the capture and trial of the perpetrator. A health monitoring app on Jessica's phone also played an important role in finding the truth. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene, and asked him and other relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. The investigator promised to provide more information later. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to arrest the prime suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. Several key pieces of evidence had led them to this conclusion. During the search of the crime scene, police found a damaged hard drive from a surveillance camera installed in front of the front door. The device was discovered in a suitcase under the bed. Further investigation uncovered a hidden photograph in their nightstand that showed Mitesh embracing another man named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera across the street revealed that only Mitesh and Jessica entered and exited their home on the day of the murder, May 14th. The footage shows that Mitesh returned home at 3:30 p.m. Jessica arrived home from work at 7 p.m. and Mitesh left the house briefly to pick up pizza at 7:44 p.m., returning at 8:50 p.m. Since no one else was seen entering or leaving the house, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: Mitesh was the likely perpetrator. Mitesh was the prime suspect in the investigation, but the police lacked concrete evidence against him. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret that Mitesh had carefully kept hidden. Jessica had suspected that her husband was being unfaithful, and her instincts were correct. However, it was not what she expected. Mitesh was hiding his true sexual orientation. His marriage to Jessica was just a cover, a way to hide his true feelings for other men. 2 years into their marriage, Mitesh met Amit, an Indian man who was openly gay. Despite their cultural differences, they men quickly fell in love and secretly met each other whenever Mitesh was away on business. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her husband was leading a double life, pretending to be the perfect spouse while carrying on an illicit affair. In 2016, Amit moved to Australia, but Amit and Mitesh continued their relationship. Mitesh had had a plan to become same-sex parents with Amit by using Jessica's embryos and finding a surrogate. Mitesh had informed Amit that Jessica was having in vitro fertilization, IVF, and had asked if they could be together after this plan, to which Amit had replied that it would depend on the results. Mitesh confided in Amit, stating that eventually there would be no more obstacles in their relationship. In a message, Mitesh chillingly wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later discovered that Mitesh was secretly taking fertility-affecting medication to avoid intimate relations with Jessica. The investigation revealed that Mitesh's internet search history was reconstructed. He had searched for "how to get rid of his wife," Hindu funeral, and procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. Notably, Jessica had a £2 million life insurance policy. After her death, Mitesh planned to claim the money and use it to buy a property in Australia. In the weeks leading up to Jessica's death, Mitesh had been actively searching for a new home, aiming to create a comfortable environment for his future family. Investigators analyzed their cell phones and found incriminating messages. They also discovered a fitness app that tracked the number of steps taken by Jessica's. The data showed that Jessica's phone had not moved since 8:04 p.m. However, 15 minutes later, the phone recorded 14 steps, suggesting that either Jessica had made her last movements or someone had moved the device. In contrast, Mitesh's phone data revealed high physical activity and an elevated heart rate in the period leading up to his wife's murder, which was unusual for him. Between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Jessica's husband, Mitesh, walked up and down the stairs multiple times, creating false evidence of a burglary by throwing objects around the house. Before calling 911, he went upstairs to conceal evidence, including a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the safe of the pharmacy he and his wife owned. During the police investigation, they found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars, which Mitesh claimed had been taken during the robbery. They also discovered a roll of duct tape similar to the one used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the piece taken as evidence from Jessica's body. To create an alibi, Mitesh had to go to his workplace the evening after the pizza party. Despite planning for years, he was remarkably careless and left a trail of evidence behind. Furthermore, DNA analysis found under Jessica's fingernails showed that it matched Mitesh's DNA. Mitesh had scratch marks on his neck, which he attributed to a fall. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Mitesh, the accused, denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his interactions with Jessica were mere coincidence. The 3-week trial strung together the developments in the case. It was established that he attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched the attacker but was eventually controlled. Initially, Mitesh had planned to kill his wife by administering the lethal dose of insulin. However, this method takes a long time to be effective and there is a risk that the plan will be discovered. To ensure a quicker outcome, Mitesh suffocated his wife by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a rope. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including empty ampules found in Mitesh Patel's laptop bag, which linked him to the crime. Mitesh brutally murdered his wife, Jessica, in their home, a place they had shared for years. The entire ordeal took only 20 minutes. He then brutally tied her up to create the appearance that she had been robbed. Following the murder, Mitesh went about his day as usual, even stopping at a pizza place and calling Jessica's phone. The news of her death left both families in shock and disbelief. Tragically, Jessica had been seeking help in the months leading up to her murder, but her cries for aid were ignored. Only her sister seemed worried, but they couldn't do much to help either. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Mitesh showed no remorse for his actions, and it seemed that the only person he felt sorry for was himself. The family was still grappling with the loss of Jessica's death, remembering her in their daily prayers and cherishing the happy moments they had shared together. It is unlikely that they will ever forgive Mitesh for his heinous crime. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that was a comfort to her loved ones. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christy Lynn Mullins. Christy Lynn Mullins was born on August 28, 1960, in Columbus, Ohio, one of 6 children in a large family. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, away from the noise and chaos of the city. In the summer of 1975, 14-year-old Christy spent most of her days socializing with friends and family, often going to the local neighborhood swimming pool. In late August, Christy babysat for a family friend on the evening of August 22nd. The next day, August 23rd, she woke up around noon and decided to go swimming to cool off. She invited her sister Kim to join her and they went to the residential area. While Kim went swimming, Christy relaxed on a deck chair. A short time later, Kim went ashore and found Christy nowhere to be seen, but Kim decided not to look for her and instead stayed at the pool. Surprisingly, when Kim returned home, Christy was not there. Hours passed and Christy still hadn't come home. Kim became even more worried. She decided to look for Christy and ran into a neighbor who told her that the police had found the body of a young woman a few miles away, but they had not been able to identify it. Kim rushed home to tell her parents, who immediately called the police to report Christy missing. It was very likely that the body found belonged to Christy, so the police directed them to the morgue for identification. Although it was difficult to recognize the identity of the body due to the severely bruised face, Christy's mother eventually accepted that the body was Christy's, her beloved daughter, thanks to the birthmark on her leg. Police later explained to the family what had happened. It turned out that at about 2:30 p.m. that same day, a man reported finding a body in the woods behind the local shopping center. He, his wife, and son had gone there to buy toys, but before entering the store, their son wanted to take a walk on the trail behind the building. This path was a popular walking path leading to a river and the area was famous for its beauty. Together with his parents, the son went for a walk on this trail. During their hike, they came across a disturbing scene about 10 yards down the trail. A man was kneeling on top of someone and repeatedly beating him with a wooden object. When he saw the family, he immediately ran away. The father rushed to the scene and found a seriously injured little girl covered in blood. His wife, who had medical training, checked the victim's pulse, but there was none. The father quickly went to a nearby shopping center and called the police from a store. He and his wife provided investigators with a detailed description of the suspect, who was a tall, slim young man with long black hair, wearing jean shorts and boots, about 20 years old. Police created a sketch of the suspect based on their description and distributed it to patrol officers. However, the investigation of the crime scene yielded no results. The wooden object used as the murder weapon was found, but they discovered no other evidence linking the perpetrator. Notably, the victim's hands were tied with a telephone cord and her bikini top was pulled down. Her t-shirt and shoes were found next to her body. Despite these signs, forensic experts found no evidence that a sexual assault had occurred. Luckily, detectives were able to continue their investigation thanks to new information from Kim, who told them about a conversation between Christy and a friend, Carol. The police summoned Carol. Carol recounted to police a suspicious phone call she had received from a stranger claiming to be a local DJ. The man had called her to talk about a fake cheerleading competition at the state fair, which was supposedly being held behind the local shopping mall. He announced the event would start at 1:45 p.m. and had told Carol to wait for someone at the entrance to the forest trail. The police were skeptical about Carol's story, and when they dug deeper, they discovered many inconsistencies. According to Carol, she had originally planned to attend the event with her sister. But they had run into Christy and her sister on the way. Carol then invited Christy to join her and they left their sisters behind to go to the mall. However, when they arrived at the entrance to the woods, no one appeared and Carol claimed that she had gone to the shopping center to ask for the time. When she turned around, Christy was gone. The police investigation revealed that there had been no cheerleading competitions in town, casting doubt on the reason for Carol and Christy's trip to the woods. Police suspected that the mysterious phone call might have been a ruse to lure Carol into the woods, but they were unable to trace the call to identify the caller. Further investigation revealed discrepancies in Carol's story. She claimed to have met Christy and her sister on the street, but Kim said they had been at the pool and Carol had come to meet them there. Additionally, Christy's mother reported a strange conversation with Carol later that evening, which raised further suspicions. Carol apologized to Christy's mother and revealed that she had been the intended target of a murder involving two people. However, she quickly retracted her words and left. Christy's mother reported this to the police. The police questioned Carol again, but she denied making a statement and stuck to her original story. Carol was then given a polygraph test, which did not reveal any signs of deception when Carol answered key questions. As a result, investigators shifted focus away from Carol and pursued other leads. Police intensified their search for the killer 3 days after Christy's murder. A police officer patrolling the streets of Columbus spotted a man who bore a striking resemblance to a sketch of Christy's killer. Patrol officers quickly called detectives to the scene and asked Jack to accompany them to the station for questioning. The man, Jack Carman, 25, agreed to go with them. However, the police soon realized that Jack was severely mentally disabled, with an IQ of about 50 points. Results based on many different tests. As a result, Jack had limited communication skills and could not read or write. He was cared for by a specialist medical facility and lived in a supervised apartment. Despite these challenges, detectives could not ignore the striking resemblance between Jack and the composite sketch of the suspect in Christy's case. The interrogation process was extremely difficult due to Jack's limited ability to understand and answer questions. Most of the time, he just answered with one word or stayed silent. The detectives began to question whether Jack was capable of fully understanding their questions. To improve the situation, they had to ask very simple and specific questions. After 6 hours of questioning, detectives were finally starting to get results. They were finally able to extract a confession from Jack. According to his testimony, on the day in question he had left his apartment, taken the bus to the shopping center and bought a shirt and pants. As Jack walked through the parking lot, he saw Christy sitting on a fence near the entrance to a wooded trail. He approached her, tied her up by tying her hands, and then dragged her into the woods where he carried out the assault. After the attack, Christy tried to run away, but Jack quickly caught up with her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and repeatedly hit her in the head. Jack then ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and boarded the bus. The next day, police took Jack to the forest where he allegedly committed the crime. There, he pointed out the exact spot and provided specific details that only the perpetrator would know, including the fact that the piece of wood used to strike the victim broke in half. Investigators also verified the testimony, asking the couple who found Christy to identify the person they had seen on the day of the incident. Both identified the man they had seen as Jack. As a result, Jack was charged with multiple offenses, including assault and murder. The prosecution chose to include it in the charges. The prosecutor initially sought the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer negotiated a deal. In exchange for a life sentence, Jack would plead guilty before the judge, thereby avoiding execution. The case moved swiftly, with thousands of people following. Just 11 days after the murder, on September 3rd, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, after the trial, public opinion began to shift, and many people started to question Jack's guilt. As more details about his confession and his background emerged in the media, people began to wonder whether he was truly capable of committing such a heinous crime. Those who knew Jack found it hard to believe that he was capable of the crime. He was a passive, timid, and compliant person who would agree to anything if pushed hard enough. In the past, he had even taken the blame for something he didn't do, like the time he claimed responsibility for breaking a boiler at a charity center, when in fact someone else was to blame. This behavior raised doubts about his ability to make a genuine confession to the crime. His supporters felt that the police must have manipulated him into confessing by feeding him information and asking pressured questions. For instance, if the police asked him if he hit the victim with a piece of wood, and he answered yes, they could use that as a confession. However, this approach can be unreliable, especially considering Jack's tendency to confess to anything when under threat. Even the mention of the electric chair was enough to make him agree to whatever the detectives wanted. Furthermore, the police took Jack to the crime scene at the same time as the witnesses, a married couple who later identified him at the police station. This raised concerns that the witnesses had been biased, as they had already seen Jack and knew he was a suspect, despite the police's claims that they never crossed paths. There were several red flags surrounding Jack's alleged involvement in the crime. For instance, the police failed to locate the bus driver or any passengers who claimed to have seen Jack on his way to the city center, which contradicted his own statement. Moreover, multiple people at the charity organization building where Jack lived and worked said to have seen him at around 1:30 p.m. This created a major timing issue. Even if Jack had left immediately after being seen by these witnesses, the bus ride to the shopping center on the outskirts of town would have taken at least 40 minutes. Given the crime was committed at 1:50 p.m., it was logistically impossible for Jack to have made it on time. This cast serious doubts about Jack's guilt and raised suspicions that the police may have coerced his confession. Christy's parents, too, began questioning whether Jack was the true culprit. At the height of the controversy, approximately 70 individuals gathered in front of City Hall on September 9th to draw attention to the case and advocate for a comprehensive investigation. They established a public committee aimed at securing justice for Jack. As a result, Jack was assigned a new lawyer, who swiftly petitioned for a case review. After several months, a judge dismissed Jack's original confession and ordered a new trial, putting the onus on the prosecution to establish his guilt from the beginning. This marked a daunting challenge for the prosecution, making their case almost unviable. Norman Mills, Christie's father, began his own investigation while preparations for the new trial were underway. Dissatisfied with the way the detectives had worked, Norman took matters into his own hands. Immediately after the murder, Norman and several neighbors searched the area where Christie was found. They discovered a bloody pair of jean shorts and men's underwear in the woods. They turned the items over to the police, who had initially missed them. It was unclear whether these items were related to the case or if they had been examined for evidence. Jack's new trial began in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two tasks: first and foremost, to prove Jack's innocence and also to try to identify the real killer. In fact, they already had a pretty strong candidate for the role, who they considered to be the prime suspect. The man who found Christ's body along with his wife was Henry Newell, who was 25 years old at the time of the murder. At the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had amassed an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder, and during the trial, the list grew even longer. Initially, Henry attracted attention because of his criminal record. Beginning in his teenage years, he had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, serving 3 prison sentences. He had successfully escaped from prison twice before being captured and brought back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th sentence, this time for burning down a house to collect insurance money. Lawyers also reviewed evidence from Christ's case and found some very suspicious details in his testimony. Henry said he had found her body, ran over, and threw a bloody piece of wood aside. He explained this by saying that he was in a state of shock at the time. But acting like that still seemed odd. Why did he pick up the murder weapon and throw it from his body for no apparent reason? He also testified that he thought the girl was still alive, so he took off his shirt and pressed it to her face. This action also raised questions. Did he actually try to stop the bleeding, or was his shirt stained with blood during the murder, and he needed to justify it somehow? Jack's lawyer found a store clerk in the mall where Henry had run to call the police. She said he was not wearing a shirt but was wearing jean shorts, although by the time police arrived, he was wearing a different pair of pants. The employee also confirmed that Henry had a new bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When asked why she didn't immediately report this to the police, she said no one had asked her. The officers themselves should have noticed this bruising but ignored it. Henry also agreed to take a polygraph test, but he ended up vomiting right on the machine. Another witness was Henry's neighbor, who said that on the night of the murder, he had talked to Henry and noticed many new scratches on his hands. The man also mentioned seeing a telephone cord in Henry's garage that was the same color and shape as the cord used to tie the victim's hands. That's not all. The neighbor said that Henry had once told him a very strange story. He claimed to know Christ's 14-year-old friend Carol and that they had once swum naked together in the pool. This story shocked everyone involved in the case. It turned out that Henry was acquainted with Carol, who was also directly involved in the case. His wife, Pam, also testified in court, saying everything had happened exactly as they told police on the first day. They had gone to the mall, and their son wanted to go for a walk. They went into the woods and found the body. Pam added that up until that point, Henry had remained at home and only stepped outside for a few minutes to scare away neighborhood children who had begun throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also testified, saying she had never met Henry. She was also asked about her intentions in telling Christ's mother that things should not have escalated to this point, but Carol again claimed she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with the crime. One of the most important moments of the trial was the showing of the entire recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became clear to everyone that Jack had simply been forced to confirm the detective's words that he had committed murder. Jack barely said anything and didn't seem to fully understand what the police wanted from him. But that was not the most important moment of the trial. On the fifth day, another unexpected witness appeared. It was Bobby, Henry's stepson, and his testimony truly shocked everyone following the case. Bobby revealed that that day, Henry had indeed gone out of the house to chase away the children who had thrown firecrackers into the yard. When Henry returned home, his shirt and sandals were missing, and Henry had scars on his hands and face. Bobby was told by his parents that they would be going to the shopping center, but when they arrived, they instead took him on a walk in the woods behind the center. Bobby claims he never asked to go for a walk, which contradicts what his parents initially said. During the walk, they found Henry's torn sandal and then Christy's body. Bobby's mother instructed him not to tell anyone about what he saw. At the trial, Bobby's grandmother testified about a disturbing comment made by Henry during Christy's farewell ceremony. After expressing her sadness about Christy's death, Henry replied, "It will teach her to keep her mouth shut." Another witness, Henry's friend, came forward and said that Henry had confessed to him that he accidentally killed Christy. Although the evidence clearly pointed to Henry's involvement, the prosecutor surprisingly announced that they would not pursue a case against Henry. The prosecutor also claimed that the initial investigation was handled correctly, despite acknowledging that the police missed or ignored many clues from the beginning. The public was outraged by this decision, leading the prosecutor to change his mind 2 days later and agree to reopen the investigation into Christy's death. Christy's father refused to give up on seeking justice and filed a civil lawsuit against Jack, but not because he believed Jack was involved in the murder. Rather, he hoped to gain access to the case files and gather more information. Unfortunately, this effort also proved unsuccessful. The case had remained stagnant until 2013, when Henry died of terminal cancer. Despite this, in the same year, former attorney John Aller became interested in the case and conducted his own investigation. He contacted all parties involved in gathering new information. Christy's relatives had provided John with a box of records that Christy's father had collected. After reviewing the records and talking to dozens of people, John believed that Henry was the culprit behind Christy's murder. John's investigation revealed that Carol had bought marijuana from Henry, which made him suspect that Henry was involved in the crime. This new discovery created a possible connection between Henry and Carol, which could explain why Carol brought Christy to the forest. One theory is that Carol planned to meet Henry in the forest to buy an illegal substance. It's possible that Carol invited Christy along, using the DJ story as a cover. A more sinister explanation suggests that Carol brought Christy to the forest at Henry's request, intending for him to harm her. However, Christy resisted, as evidenced by Henry's injuries, and he ultimately killed her. When John took over the case, Henry had passed away from cancer at the age of 63. However, John continued his work and released a book about Christy's murder. The release of the book sparked a new wave of interest, and Christy's relatives demanded that the investigation be reopened. Some of Henry's relatives also confirmed that Henry was the one who killed the girl. This led to the reopening of the murder investigation in May 2014. Detectives re-examined the evidence, interviewed dozens of people, and reassessed Henry's confession. They re-examined Christy's clothes and found traces of semen, but they were too small for DNA analysis. The investigation lasted until late 2015, when detectives announced that Henry was the one who had committed the crime. But because he had passed away, the case could not go to court. The investigation ended with the conclusion that Henry had left home, gone to the road behind the shopping center, seen Christy alone, and decided to assault her with a telephone cord, taking her deep into the woods. Henry had attacked Christy, injuring her. Then he killed her with a piece of wood. Returning home, Henry recounted the incident to his wife, and the two began to make plans to avoid punishment. For many years afterward, Carol never revealed the truth. Police later apologized to Christie's family for their careless handling of the incident. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 21, 1996, in Kansas, as the oldest of 5 children. She was a responsible sibling, often putting her parents' needs before her own. Her family was deeply rooted in their faith, spending a significant amount of time at church. When Zoe was in high school, her family moved to Dallas, where she attended a school that fostered her creativity and passion for the arts. She excelled in drawing and enjoyed participating in school plays. Outside of school, Zoe worked at an art studio and as a lifeguard during her summer breaks. After graduating, Zoe had the opportunity to attend top universities, but she decided to delay her education to focus on her church. In October 2015, at the age of 18, Zoe was preparing for a mission trip with her church. She planned to attend the Sunday service to discuss the trip's details. Zoe left her house around 4:40 p.m. in the family minivan, promising her parents she would return for dinner. However, she failed to come back, which was unusual for her. Zoe's parents tried to reach her after the service, but she didn't respond to their messages or calls. They then contacted her friends, thinking she might have visited someone, but no one had seen her. As the evening wore on, her parents grew increasingly worried and decided to call the church to see if Zoe had shown up there. However, they were surprised to learn that Zoe had never arrived at the church. This was highly unusual behavior for Zoe, as she had always kept her parents informed of her current whereabouts and had never disappeared without explanation. So they drove themselves to the police station to report Zoe missing, and the police began the search. The police spent all night retracing the route from Zoe's house to the church but found no sign of Zoe. Using an iPhone tracking app, police were able to locate her phone. They discovered Zoe's phone just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the street. Zoe's parents rushed to the creek. An officer approached them and informed them that a car accident had been reported a few hours earlier and that police had received a call from a witness walking a dog. That witness claimed that a man had approached him and said that a woman had been injured in a car accident near the creek. The witness rushed to the scene and found a woman lying in a pool of blood, so he called 911. As the police investigated, they quickly identified the victim as Zoe Hastings. However, it soon became clear that she had not died as a result of the accident. The evidence suggested that she had been murdered. Zoe's body was found a short distance from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a significant amount of blood near her body, and police observed multiple cuts on her neck. Her dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to suspect that the killer had likely assaulted and abused her. The police prevented Zoe's parents from approaching her body, shielding them from the gruesome scene. As they investigated further, they discovered several clues. Notably, all the minivan doors except the driver's side were locked, suggesting that the perpetrator may have driven the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. Beneath the bridge, about 10 feet from the creek, a blood-stained knife was discovered. It's likely that this was the weapon used in Zoe's murder. By examining her phone records and GPS data, investigators established that Zoe had arrived at the creek by 5:01 p.m. after leaving home at 4:41 p.m. GPS revealed she drove there in approximately 20 minutes, indicating her death probably occurred within a few minutes of arrival. To account for this timeline, investigators reconstructed her activities that afternoon, tracing her stops from leaving her home. During the examination, investigators uncovered evidence. Zoe visited the nearby DVD rental store after departing home. To return a DVD she borrowed from that rental shop situated beside a Walgreens, near her place of residence. More than 50 people near that area had confirmed it. Among them had been Lester Clark, a tattoo shop employee who had worked next door to the DVD store. It wasn't until a few hours after work around 4:45 p.m. that Lester revealed he had seen a female customer who had been shopping at the store and had approached her. Lester admitted to having witnessed Zoe going to the DVD rental store. Lester added that he saw a man behaving suspiciously near the crime scene. Lester described the man as short and heavily built, and African American. However, Lester was too far away to notice any other distinguishing features. Later that evening, Lester saw the same man walking towards the store alone. The second witness, Gary Whitman, a homeless man, corroborated Lester's account. At around 4:45 p.m., Gary saw a woman approaching a white minivan in the parking lot. A man then approached her from behind, preventing her from entering the vehicle. The man showed her something from his pocket, and the woman subsequently got into the car, moving to the passenger seat. The man then drove away. Gary also described the suspect as short and heavily built, and African American, and found the situation highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it is unclear if the clerk made the call. During the investigation, experts made several key discoveries. A forensic pathologist examined Zoe's body and found a small amount of male semen, indicating that Zoe had been sexually assaulted before being murdered. However, the amount of semen was too small to conduct a full DNA analysis. Investigators analyzed Zoe's car for any foreign fingerprints on the doors or steering wheel, but found none. This discovery, combined with witness statements, suggested that the killer may have driven Zoe away in her minivan. However, the lack of fingerprints did not mean that the killer did not drive the car, as they may have wiped down the surfaces after the crime. When examining Zoe's body, investigators found several hairs, but they were too small to extract a full DNA sample from. However, a breakthrough came when a DNA sample was found on a knife near the crime scene. The DNA was matched to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, who had a violent criminal history, including arrests for theft, assault, and home invasion. 1 year before the murder, Antonio was accused of sexually assaulting a 17-year-old girl, the daughter of his girlfriend. According to the girl, Antonio offered her a ride, but took her to a secluded area and assaulted her. He was arrested and claimed that the sex was consensual, but the prosecution was unable to prove his guilt, and he was acquitted. Antonio became the prime suspect in the murder investigation. As a result, he was arrested. However, during the interrogation, Antonio denied any involvement in the crime. To gather more evidence, investigators collected a DNA sample from Antonio and compared it to the semen found on the victim's body. Unfortunately, both DNA samples were too small for a full analysis, so the experts used a different method. The partial DNA profiles from the hair and semen were then compared to Antonio's DNA. The results showed that it was matched, but not definitively. Meanwhile, detectives searched Antonio's smartphone and found some incriminating text messages. On the day before the murder, Antonio sent a message to a friend he lived with, stating he was moving out and would never see him again. At 1:48 a.m. the next day, Antonio sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother had died right in front of him. But this information was later found to be false. In the hour leading up to Zoe's death, Antonio sent 2 texts to another woman, revealing that he had been drinking, driving around the city, and crying. These messages were his last before the incident. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., Antonio texted a friend, expressing confusion and despair about his life. The next day, He sent a message to his ex-girlfriend, stating that his life was over and that she would soon understand why. Detectives investigating Antonio's online activities found that he had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, with a particular focus on the crime sections. Notably, 5 of these access were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. This was unusual, as prior to the death of Zoe, Antonio rarely visited news sites. His browser history also showed a single visit to a page about gang activity. Further investigation of Antonio's smartphone revealed GPS data that, at 4:34 p.m., Antonio's phone connected to a cell tower covering the area where the store was located, coinciding with the time Zoe was there. Although this data was not conclusive evidence, it suggested that Antonio's phone was in the vicinity of the store just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. This was significant, as Antonio's home was far away, and his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower throughout the day. Detectives discovered that Antonio had started working at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. However, on the day after the murder, he skipped his shift without providing any explanation. Despite the extensive circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the strongest evidence remained his DNA on the knife handle. Nevertheless, this evidence alone might not be enough for a conviction, as merely holding a knife does not prove involvement in the murder. It is possible that Antonio used the knife in a different context, and someone else could have used it to commit the crime. Since no other evidence was found, detectives decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its report of the events. According to the prosecution, Antonio approached Zoe in the parking lot, threatening her with a knife and forcing her to get into her car. He then took the driver's seat and drove away. The prosecution argued that Antonio, who was emotionally distressed due to the death of a relative and intoxicated from consuming a significant amount of alcohol. The investigators' theory was that Antonio had intended to assault Zoe when he abducted her. He chose his victim, Zoe, by chance when he spotted her in the parking lot. Antonio saw an opportunity to commit a crime and acted on it. He then drove to a secluded creek area that was difficult to spot due to the surrounding trees and low-lying terrain. At this location, he forced Zoe out of the car and attacked her, stabbing her 6 times in the neck area. Antonio got back into the car and tried to drive it into the creek, possibly to hide any remaining evidence. However, the car only partially submerged, allowing Antonio to potentially wipe his fingerprints from the steering wheel and door handle before fleeing the scene and return to the store, where Lester had seen him according to initial testimony. The defense argued that most of the evidence was not convincing enough and did not prove Antonio's guilt. For example, hair analysis only showed that the DNA could not be ruled out as belonging to Antonio. But it did not confirm his involvement. DNA on the knife also did not necessarily prove that Antonio committed murder. The defense argued that Antonio could have touched the knife under different circumstances before working at the store. They suggested he might have used the knife while working at a movie theater, where he sometimes collected items left behind by visitors. However, there was no evidence to support this claim. Furthermore, if someone had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to be careful to avoid removing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been a difficult task. The defense attempted to downplay the testimony of the second witness, Gary, by revealing that Gary had a warrant for his arrest due to a parole violation. They tried to exclude Gary's testimony, but the prosecution argued that Gary's willingness to cooperate with police, despite the risk of arrest, proved his sincerity. Gary insisted he wanted to do the right thing, even if it meant getting arrested. Antonio's lawyers argued that their client was elsewhere at the time of Zoe's murder, in order to helping a friend, but they failed to provide any substantial evidence to support this claim. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but as the trial progressed, they realized this would be difficult to achieve with the available evidence. They dropped the request for the death penalty. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury found Antonio guilty of murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents expressed gratitude to the investigators and all those involved in the trial for delivering justice for their daughter. Her father shared that he had always warned his children about the dangers of the world and had taken every precaution to protect them. However, despite his efforts, his eldest daughter was abducted just a short distance from their home, and he was powerless to prevent it. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She grew up with her mother and brother. Lisa and her mother had an exceptionally close relationship, rarely arguing. As a teenager, Lisa developed a passion for dance and an interest in modern technology. She was an early adopter of emerging technologies, including email, which was still a novelty at the time. This interest in technology would later shape her career path. After graduating from college, Lisa found a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother then used her savings to buy Lisa an apartment in a desirable neighborhood. Lisa lived alone in the apartment, progressing her career and spending time with her family whenever possible. She also continued to pursue her passion for dance. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, then 36, hosted her mother and some family friends at her apartment for the evening. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes before heading home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, her mother assumed Lisa was simply busy. Since Lisa had dance practice scheduled for the next day, her mother decided to wait. However, the entire day passed without any word from Lisa. After trying unsuccessfully to contact Lisa for several days, Lisa's mother began to worry. When Lisa did not show up for work on Monday, her co-workers called her mother to express their concern. The mother immediately decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex. When Lisa's mother arrived at her home, she saw a group of police officers. Lisa's mother approached the police to ask what was going on and was told that residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The apartment manager investigated, found the door unlocked, and called the police after discovering a body on the floor. Police quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed signs of trauma, making it clear she had been murdered. The advanced state of decomposition suggested that Lisa had been dead for several days. The police suspected that Lisa had been assaulted due to the presence of her underwear next to her body. The crime scene was marked by extensive blood stains on the floor and bed, with the TV and air conditioner still on. However, the disarray of the apartment was later found to be consistent with Lisa's usual living habits. There was no indication of a robbery, as all of Lisa's valuables, including jewelry, were left untouched. The only missing items were her keys and a gym bag. A peculiar detail was the discovery that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's hair and taken it with them. Detectives believed that the killer may have known Lisa personally. This theory was supported by the lack of forced entry into the apartment complex, which was secured by a fence and required a key or resident approval for access. Police investigating Lisa's murder began by interviewing her neighbors. Their first lead came when a neighbor mentioned discovering a bent metal door frame and faint blood stains on her door 2 days before Lisa's body was discovered. The neighbor had previously reported the incident to the building's management, but they had not notified the police. Police are certain that Lisa's murder was linked to a break-in at her neighbor's apartment. It is possible that the person trying to break into her neighbor's apartment was seen by Lisa and killed her, but another theory is that the break-in may have occurred after Lisa was murdered. Police also interviewed the person who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. She said that 2 days before Lisa's body was found, she tried to open the apartment door with her key but found it locked from the inside. When she looked through the door, she saw a naked woman lying on the floor and a male voice talking. Assuming it was a private situation, the cleaner quickly left without doing anything. Police suspected Lisa was dead when the cleaner heard a man's voice. And it was her killer, who was still in the apartment. The cleaner also reported seeing a black Ziploc bag near the body. An envelope containing cash was found taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. The money was for the cleaner, as Lisa always left it with her the day before cleaning. The presence of the envelope suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother left, sometime between midnight and early morning. Neighbors who lived downstairs reported hearing a loud noise coming from upstairs on the night of the attack, followed by someone coming down the stairs. Although they did not see who it was, the neighbors' accounts provided a timeline of events. Police continued to search Lisa's apartment for clues while medical professionals examined her body. Forensic analysis revealed that a fingerprint on the toilet seat did not belong to Lisa. In an attempt to identify the fingerprint, the police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's friends and family members, but none of them matched the mystery fingerprint. Detectives therefore suspected that the mystery fingerprint might belong to Lisa's killer. Medical examiners released their report, shedding new light on the case. Lisa's body showed more than 20 stab wounds, but the advanced decomposition made it difficult to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The medical team also discovered skin particles under Lisa's nails, which were likely to have come from her attacker, and sent them to the lab for analysis. One of the pillowcases showed multiple blood stains, which upon analysis were found to be a mixture of Lisa's blood and another person's. The police sent the blood stains to the laboratory for further testing. Police believe the killer may have accidentally injured himself when stabbing Lisa. At the scene, they discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit in the toilet, which the killer may have used to bandage his wound. Additionally, the killer may have left fingerprints on the toilet seat when discarding the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to a man whose DNA was not in the FBI database. Furthermore, the skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails and the blood on her knee were from the same person. Although the DNA did not match anyone in the database, detectives now had a DNA profile of the killer. The police compared the DNA evidence with samples from criminals in the area. They also began to scrutinize Lisa's acquaintances. Lisa's mother mentioned that Lisa had met a man named Albert Ketto, and that they had planned to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Albert Ketto had canceled their plans just days before. Police brought Albert Ketto in for questioning and noticed a large cut on his hand. Police considered Albert Ketto a potential suspect. However, Albert Ketto denied any involvement in the crime. Police collected Albert Ketto's fingerprints and DNA samples for further analysis. However, the test results showed that none of Albert Ketto's samples matched the blood found on the pillowcase. Additionally, the skin particles under Lisa's fingernails belonged to someone else. This new information led investigators to expand their search for other suspects. Police decided to look at messages left on Lisa's answering machine in the days before she was killed. Police compiled a list of 40 callers but discovered one unusual message. It came from a man who had called Lisa just hours before the murder. He left a message saying, "You know how it goes. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played the message to Lisa's friend, the friend recognized the voice as Albert Robinson, a co-worker of Lisa's. Lisa and Albert Robinson worked together. However, Albert Robinson had expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she did not return his feelings. Albert Robinson appeared at Lisa's memorial service a few days after the murder. Albert Robinson claimed that he and Lisa were in love, saying that they planned to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother objected to this. Lisa told them that she had no feelings for Albert Robinson and that the relationship between the two was just friends. During questioning, Albert Robinson denied any involvement in Lisa's murder, claiming that he loved Lisa and would never hurt her. However, he refused to provide DNA and fingerprint samples to the police, which aroused suspicion and made him the prime suspect. Police obtained a search warrant for Albert Robinson's home, where they discovered something unusual. Albert Robinson's home contained many photos of Lisa. However, despite the evidence, he continued to deny his involvement. He cooperated by providing his fingerprints and DNA samples to the police. However, they were surprised when Albert Robinson's test results did not match the samples collected at Lisa's apartment. Police eliminated Albert Robinson as a suspect. Due to lack of evidence, the case remained unsolved for many years. The investigation continues, with police waiting for the suspect's DNA or fingerprints to be matched in a database. Over the years, Lisa's mother has used social media platforms to plead for information. But the police have yet to uncover any new clues, leaving the case even more unsolved. In 2010, the FBI used new DNA technology to identify suspects by matching their DNA to relatives in a database. This method was limited to close relatives. On September 2nd, police received a call from the FBI with the news. Although the FBI did not compare the DNA to possible relatives in the database, they did retest the original DNA sample as part of the process. Amazingly, 13 years after the murder, the retested DNA sample was a perfect match. DNA from blood and skin particles found under Lisa's fingernails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, whose DNA had recently been added to the FBI database. Although Anthony had a lengthy criminal record, his DNA was not in the database because he had committed a minor crime. However, a change in California law requires DNA samples from all convicted felons, regardless of the severity of their crimes. As a result, Anthony's DNA was collected after he was arrested for petty theft. The investigation revealed that Anthony's fingerprints were also on file and matched those found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts were able to identify the specific finger that left the fingerprint. Prior to the arrest, police searched for additional evidence that linked Anthony to the crime. 13 years ago, police reviewed calls to Lisa's phone before she was killed, but they ignored calls made after her death. Recently, police discovered a call made by Anthony to Lisa's phone just one day after her death. He left a message, the content of which seemed normal and did not arouse any suspicion at the time. If the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they would have found his extensive criminal record. When they went through Lisa's belongings, detectives found Anthony's phone number in her address book, indicating that she knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that Lisa had dated Anthony in high school. The police now had all the information they needed to question Anthony. Since Anthony was homeless at the time and had no fixed address, the police approached cautiously to avoid Anthony fleeing. They arrested him under the pretext of investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. Police began asking about a series of robberies, gradually bringing up Anthony's previous convictions. Eventually, police asked him if he knew a woman named Lisa Valdez. He initially denied knowing her, but when shown a photo, he admitted that they had been high school acquaintances. Anthony also claimed that he had not seen Lisa since the late 1980s. The police pressed Anthony for information about his relationship with Lisa. Eventually, the police produced evidence of his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in 1998. Upon hearing this, Anthony burst into tears. Anthony was restrained as he cried and screamed. He was eventually charged with murder, and detectives informed Lisa's family that her killer had been arrested. However, the trial did not begin until 4 years later. During the trial, Anthony initially appeared confident, but as the trial progressed, his pace changed. He began appearing in court with a Bible and wearing a cross. Anthony's lawyer argued that his client was incapable of committing the murder due to a medical condition that weakened his muscles, making movement extremely difficult. Despite the defense's argument, the prosecution presented strong evidence linking Anthony to the crime scene. This included his skin cells found under the Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. Anthony maintained his innocence, claiming he had not seen the Lisa since the late 1980s. The prosecution, on the other hand, proposed a different scenario. They believed Anthony had contacted the Lisa, visited her home, and attempted to engage in intimate relations with her. When she refused, he became enraged and killed her. As part of the crime, he cut off a portion of her hair and took it with him before fleeing the scene. Ultimately, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict, finding Anthony guilty of first-degree murder. However, the prosecution faced challenges in securing a conviction for sexual assault due to the advanced state of the Lisa's decomposition, which made it difficult to gather sufficient evidence. The charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, which carries a lighter sentence. Anthony was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 16 years. Anthony has been in prison since then and continues to maintain his innocence. Anthony will be eligible for parole in 2031 at age 72. However, Anthony's chances of being paroled are slim, as parole boards typically view refusal to plead guilty as a lack of remorse. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998, in the small Swedish town of Hu, where she grew up in a peaceful environment with her parents and older sister. Lisa was a kind, positive, and determined individual with a strong personality. She had already made up her mind to study architecture in Australia before completing her education. Lisa's love for travel was sparked by numerous trips with her parents to various countries, which also instilled in her a sense of independence from her teenage years. To earn her own money, she took on part-time jobs. In the summer of 2015, at the age of 17, Lisa landed her first job at a cafe located about 40 minutes from her home. Initially, her parents drove her to work, but soon her father gifted her a scooter. The scooter was a welcome gift, allowing her to commute to work independently. However, for the first few weeks, her father accompanied to ensure her safety, as she had limited experience driving on the roads. Lisa only works on weekends and her father always takes her to and from the cafe home. However, on June 7th, her father decided to let her drive herself. On that particular day, her parents visited her at work during lunch, when the cafe was very busy. They had a quick snack together before returning home. Later that day, at 6:23, Lisa sent her father a text saying she was leaving work. 3 minutes later, he received a call from her, but there was no answer when he picked up. He heard a soft voice over the phone, and the sound of a car door closing, leading him to believe that Lisa had accidentally dialed his number while talking to a coworker. Despite calling out her name several times, he got no response and eventually ended the call, expecting her to arrive home soon. However, as the minutes ticked by, Lisa failed to show up, causing her parents to grow increasingly worried. It was her first time driving the scooter alone, and her father was deeply concerned for her safety. He attempted to call her multiple times, but her phone was turned off. After a few more minutes of waiting, Lisa's father decided to drive along the route she would have taken, hoping to meet her along the way. He drove slowly, scanning the road for any sign of her, fearing she might have been in an accident. Despite his efforts, there was no sign of Lisa. The man arrived at the cafe where his daughter Lisa worked, but she wasn't there. However, her scooter was parked outside, which initially calmed his nerves. But upon closer inspection, he noticed her scooter keys were still in the ignition and her helmet was hanging from the handle. This discovery raised his concerns, as Lisa would never leave her scooter unattended. Around the same time, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to get some information about her daughter's whereabouts. The cafe owner claimed to be unaware of Lisa's location and explained that she had spoken to her employees earlier, who said they were closing the cafe. The cafe owner then drove to the cafe and met up with Lisa's father. Together, they began searching the cafe and its surroundings. The cafe owner also enlisted the help of 4 friends who lived nearby. As the search continued, Lisa's mother and older sister checked the bus schedule, thinking it was possible that Lisa might have taken the bus instead of her scooter. They drove to the bus stop in their town, but unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Despite their efforts, Lisa's family was still unable to find her, and their concerns continued to grow. Lisa's relatives quickly contacted the police after realizing she was missing. It was nearly 1 p.m. Police quickly conducted an extensive search. A crucial discovery was Lisa's scooter, which was left in the parking lot with the keys still in it, leading the police to suspect she might have been abducted. Abductions are extremely rare in Sweden, particularly in Lisa's rural hometown, so the police responded swiftly by deploying multiple search teams with dogs and having officers canvass every nearby house. As news of Lisa's disappearance spread, her classmates and friends took to social media to raise awareness and potentially gather witness accounts. Despite the overnight search, no progress was made. On Monday morning, the police publicly announced Lisa's disappearance and urged anyone with information to come forward. Around the same time, a man working at a barn across from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives re-examined a barn previously inspected on the evening of Lisa's disappearance and discovered a glove. They presented the glove to Lisa's parents, who identified it as their daughter's, providing further evidence for the abduction theory. Police have stepped up the search by sending additional personnel and equipment to assist. By then, Lisa's disappearance had made national headlines, drawing hundreds of volunteers to the search. On Tuesday, the police received multiple leads. A group of volunteers searched a dirt road near the cafe, finding a phone case, receipt, ticket, and broken smartphone screen. After discovering these items, investigators confirmed that they all belonged to Lisa, so they concentrated the search in that area. Further investigation yielded additional parts of the broken smartphone, Lisa's ID, and more receipts. These items were all scattered along the same dirt road, increasing the police's certainty that Lisa was indeed a victim of abduction. The search for Lisa quickly gained a large amount of attention and support, with the number of people involved growing significantly each day. This case became the main news story in Sweden. Hundreds of volunteers from across the country flocked to participate in the search. A group of local volunteers specializing in finding missing people also participated in the search for Lisa. This made Lisa's search operation the largest in Sweden's modern history, with over 1,000 people involved. The police received numerous calls with potential leads. A woman reported a suspicious incident while she was jogging the day before Lisa went missing. A man standing next to his car stopped her on the road and asked for directions to an unfamiliar city in English. When she tried to help him using Google Maps, the man asked her to get into his car to show the route on his navigator. The woman found this request suspicious and refused, continuing her jog instead. The woman shared a crucial detail with the police. She believed she had seen the man before, among the workers repairing a barn across the road from the cafe where Lisa was last seen. On the day Lisa went missing, her co-workers noticed something unusual. A witness saw 2 men standing across the road from the cafe, stared at the shop. Although the witness didn't think much of it at the time, but she shared this detail with the police after Lisa's disappearance. The following morning, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings were found. As they went further, they found Lisa's driver's license and house keys. It seemed that Lisa's abductor was throwing her belongings out of a vehicle. Despite all efforts, police and volunteers found no other clues in the area. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was driving home from the search when he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. He decided to re-examine the barn for clues. The friend retrieved a flashlight from his car as it was getting dark and searched the barn for several minutes. He soon spotted something shiny on the floor, which turned out to be a woman's earring, along with an identical earring nearby. The man reported his discovery to the police, who then showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. After confirming that the earrings belonged to their daughter, the police conducted a more thorough search of the storehouse. Initially, the detective explained that the primary focus on the first day of the search was finding Lisa herself. As a result, the barn was not thoroughly inspected, and small items like earrings may have been overlooked. This time, however, numerous forensic experts and search dogs were brought in to aid in the investigation. During the more extensive search, the police found a piece of evidence behind one of the walls that initially seemed unrelated to the case: human feces. Forensic experts, however, proposed an intriguing theory. According to them, in the aftermath of committing severe crimes, the perpetrator's body often releases a significant amount of adrenaline, sometimes leading to a sudden and uncontrollable urge to defecate. It's not uncommon for perpetrators to lose control of their bodily functions due to adrenaline during a crime. Given that Lisa's glove and earrings were discovered in the storehouse, investigators suspected that if she was abducted, the perpetrator might have taken her to the storehouse. They considered the possibility that the perpetrator, under the influence of adrenaline, might have relieved themselves and left behind feces. These feces were subsequently sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers searched a farm approximately 2 miles from the cafe. The farm consisted of several large buildings with many employees, and the search team decided to inspect each one. Shortly after their arrival, 2 men appeared, communicating only in English as they didn't speak Swedish. One of them claimed that the police had already searched the farm, but the search team leader was skeptical. He believed he would have been informed if the police had indeed visited the farm, so he decided to proceed with the search. The 2 men observed the volunteers for a while before leaving. About an hour later, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones hidden underneath. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and confirmed that the items found were indeed Lisa's. To gather more evidence, forensic experts were dispatched to the farm for a thorough investigation. Detectives also investigated the story about 2 suspicious men who attempted to deter volunteers from searching the farm. During their inquiry, the police revisited a report from a woman who encountered an English-speaking man while jogging. The police had a potential suspect in mind. In the early stages of the search, they had visited nearby houses, includes a house where 2 Lithuanian brothers live with their wives. What caught the police's attention was that these 3 individuals did not speak Swedish and communicated in English, making them the only people in the area who did not speak the local language. Additionally, the police had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at a barn near the cafe and the farm where Lisa's helmet was found, indicating they were familiar with these locations. Furthermore, the dirt road where Lisa's belongings were discovered led directly to their house. The police decided to question the 3 individuals since they were the prime suspects. Meanwhile, forensic experts and volunteers arrived at the farm to continue their inspection. Their attention was drawn to an old, neglected trailer surrounded by tall grass, which seemed abandoned for years. However, the flattened grass near the door suggested recent activity. Trapped grass under the door also indicated it had been opened recently. Upon opening the door, the forensic experts were met with a strong smell of decay. Inside, They found a changing room with multiple clothing lockers. All are locked except one. This led them to suspect that Lisa's body might be inside one of the locked lockers. However, they eventually found Lisa's body in an unlocked closet, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small space, the perpetrator managed to fit Lisa inside. A rope was around her neck, and her head was covered with a large amount of tape. Her pants were pulled down, and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts concluded that Lisa's cause of death was strangulation, with no evidence of sexual assault. Her clothing was sent to the lab for further examination. As news of her body's discovery spread rapidly across the country, the case had already been making headlines in Sweden. The brutality of Lisa's murder shocked the entire nation, as such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden. A strange and disturbing discovery was made on YouTube the same day her body was discovered. A video titled 13, featuring a countdown timer, had been posted 13 days before the murder. What makes this video scarier is that it was uploaded to a channel called Lisa Home. News of the video spread quickly through the media, leaving many people stunned by the series of coincidences. Some speculated that the murder had been predicted, but it was later revealed that the channel name and video title had been changed after Lisa's body was discovered, explaining the eerie coincidence. This has raised concerns that this could be a joke or an attempt to create another conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, the police worked day and night tirelessly to catch Lisa's murderer and solve the case as quickly as possible. At the time of the discovery, investigators had already questioned 2 brothers and a woman, all of whom denied any involvement in the murder. The 3 individuals claimed to have been at home at the time of the abduction, providing alibis for one another. According to their accounts, the older brother, Narigis, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was using the computer. Narigis also stated that around 8 p.m., he woke up and went to a gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police were skeptical of their alibis, as it was possible that the 3 were covering for each other. DNA samples were collected, but initially, no evidence directly linked any of them to the murder. However, this was short-lived. Forensic experts were working diligently in the storehouse and on the farm, utilizing all available resources, and soon their efforts paid off. In the storehouse, a small office-like room was discovered with a large window overlooking the cafe. Upon investigation, experts found 15 semen stains on the walls and floor near the window, suggesting someone had been standing there, watching the cafe employees, including Lisa, and engaging in self-gratification. The semen samples were sent to the lab for analysis, and DNA profiles were quickly extracted. All 15 samples matched the DNA of 35-year-old Narigis. Additionally, the feces found in the storehouse also belonged to him. In the adjacent room, previously used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor with a thick layer of dust, except for a small strip. The size of this strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was also found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Narigis. On the floor beneath the pipe, a piece of the same rope was discovered. Experts analyzed it and found 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Narigis's. This discovery was an important clue for the police. This indicates that the rope used to kill Lisa was related to Narigis. A crucial piece of evidence was discovered in the room where Lisa's body was found, a hair belonging to her. Further investigation revealed DNA traces from Narigis on Lisa's jacket, leading the police to believe she was killed in that location. Police have been studying the evidence and using it to piece together what might have happened. Narigis had been watching the cafe for some time and waited for an opportunity to strike. When Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her, possibly asking for directions or using another tactic to gain her trust. He may have then asked her to get into his car to enter the route into the GPS system. Given Lisa's kind nature and willingness to help others, it's likely she agreed to help him. Once she was in the car, Narigis taped her mouth shut and drove her to the storehouse. There, he bound her with a rope. According to medical experts, the killer's adrenaline rush at the scene may have caused him to lose control of his bodily functions, resulting in defecation on the floor. After Lisa's death, the perpetrator placed her body in the car and drove to the farm, discarding her belongings along the way. He then hid her body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes. The entire ordeal, from abduction to hiding the body, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Narigis maintains his innocence despite mounting evidence against him. His wife and younger brother were released due to lack of evidence and promptly returned to their home country, Lithuania. The trial preparations were intense, with Narigis claiming his DNA was found at the crime scene because he had worked in the storehouse for a long time. He also provided an alibi, which was corroborated by his wife and brother, although their credibility was questionable. This defense may work in court, but the finding of Nereus' DNA on Lisa's clothing suggests direct contact on the day of the murder. Furthermore, a witness reported seeing Narigis' car near the cafe around the time of Lisa's abduction, contradicting his alibi. The car was seen driving back and forth between the cafe and the farm, while Narigis claimed to have been sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. Months after Lisa's body was discovered, experts continued to analyze the evidence using advanced equipment. They found Narigis' DNA on nearly all of Lisa's clothing, including her underwear. Given the high-profile nature of the case, investigators sought additional clues to solidify the evidence against Narigis. As part of their investigation, they traveled to Lithuania to re-question Narigis' wife and brother. Narigis' wife maintained her initial alibi, claiming he was at home between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. However, when detectives spoke with Narigis' younger brother, they finally obtained the information they needed. After being presented with the evidence against Narigis and the details of the crime, the younger brother revealed that Narigis was not at home that evening. According to the younger brother, Narigis returned around 7:30 p.m., covered in dirt, and immediately washed his clothes. When the police began questioning the residents and approached their house, Narigis instructed his brother to tell police he was home at the time of the crime. Narigis later explained that he was afraid of being wrongly accused due to his immigrant status and lack of alibi during the abduction. The younger brother initially believed Narigis innocent, but after learning about the evidence, he realized this wasn't true. A month after murder, a large crowd attended Lisa's funeral, far exceeding the church's capacity of 130 people. To accommodate the mourners, organizers set up benches and large screens outside, allowing everyone to watch the ceremony. 4 months later, the trial began. Narigis' lawyer argued that his client's DNA on Lisa's clothing could be explained by his work in the storehouse. However, the prosecution countered that this explanation didn't hold up, especially regarding Lisa's underwear. The only plausible way Narigis' DNA could have ended up on her underwear was through direct contact. The lawyer failed to provide any evidence supporting Narigis' innocence. At one point, lawyers suggested an alternative theory, that Narigis' younger brother was the real killer. The lawyer failed to address the possibility of DNA manipulation during the trial, which lasted a month and resulted in Narigis being found guilty of murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security Swedish prison, which offered relatively comfortable living conditions. Narigis' lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict but was unsuccessful. In 2017, Narigis made a surprising decision when he requested to be deported to a prison in Lithuania. Despite Lithuanian prisons being notoriously worse than Swedish ones, the court granted his request, probably because it would result in substantial cost savings for Swedish taxpayers. It did not take long to understand the reason behind Narigis' decision. He appealed to the Lithuanian court and successfully had his sentence reduced from life to 15 years. However, this victory was short-lived, as the court later overturned the decision, reinstating his life sentence. Unfortunately for Neregius, he was now stuck in a Lithuanian prison, with no chance of returning to the more comfortable Swedish prison. In August 2022, 5 years after his initial imprisonment, Neregius has been transferred to another prison in Lithuania, where he encountered another life-threatening situation. During a block transfer, an inmate attacked Neregius with a shank, causing severe injuries that ultimately led to his death on the way to the hospital. Regarding Neregius' wife, the question of her involvement in the crime remains unclear. Although police believe it is highly unlikely that she was directly involved in the abduction or murder, they do not rule out the possibility that she may have been aware of her husband's actions and provided a false alibi to help him. If she had been directly involved, experts would have likely found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. Additionally, Neregius' younger brother has raised suspicions. Cafe employees reported seeing two men, likely Neregius and his younger brother, standing near the barn and watching the employees. However, the younger brother's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. It is possible that the brothers were indeed observing the employees and discussing inappropriate topics, but only Neregius ultimately committed the crime.